Good morning, everyone from beautiful British Columbia in Western Canada. My name is Shobna Jayamadhavan, and it's such a pleasure to join you this morning from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples. I'm with Simon Fraser University, and it's my pleasure to be the series moderator for Impresario Global's four-part dialogue series. What a gift to be able to come together from different parts of the world to talk about a topic that we've been talking about for a very long time: the importance of leading with the head and heart. And during this pandemic, we have seen not just our lives being turned upside down, but organizations struggling to not just navigate the pandemic, but also figure out a way to get out of the pandemic and recover with an approach that will allow us to embrace the new realities of the world. So, without much ado, it's my pleasure to warmly welcome, and introduce our esteemed panelist, Asif Ubade, founder and CEO of Never Grow Up. While working with leading Indian firms in India, Asif began nursing the idea of starting his own venture that would concentrate on building and positively enhancing the Indian corporate workplace culture. This is how Never Grow Up, I love that name, came into existence in 2010. Asif also co founded Yellow Seed Content Solutions, a content strategy and development agency. Welcome, Asif. Anthony Colanino. Anthony, from the US, partners with schools across America, developing growth minded practices and cultures for improved reading, learning, teaching. His new book, Leading with Head and Heart, a practical guide to elevating the school of today and tomorrow, guides readers on a strategic journey towards more impactful and inspiring school leadership. Welcome, Anthony. Javier Lopez Cesarin, joining us from Mexico City, entrepreneur and faithful believer in innovation as an agent of change and engine of economies. Javier is currently the federal congressman of the LXV legislature. He chaired the Technical Council of Knowledge and Innovation. All these individuals, by the way, have extremely impressive and long bios, which I wish I had time to read, but I'm not going to be able to go there. And the work that he did with the Technology Council was part of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. He's also the author of the book Dialogues of Innovation and the book Innovation and Attitude. Thank you so much for joining us today, Javier. Ruth Mojid Ramirez. Ruth, joining us from Ottawa, Canada, is the founder and Chief Equity Officer of the Inclusion Project. Ruth was awarded the Community Leadership Award in 2019 and recognized by the Premier and Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia for her contribution to supporting newcomers to the region. She's a fellow with the Institute of Canadian Citizenship, a lead researcher and mentor with UNESCO Knowledge and for Change Consortium, and an instructor in community-based lead research at the University of Victoria. Welcome, Ruth. Supriya Paul was unable to join us today. Instead, we have an amazing young panelist joining us from India. Asif also is joining us from India today. Akshit Tyagi is the author of Now That We Are Here, The Future of Everything, published by Penguin Random House in April 2021. He's also the founder of Work Hack, an AI-based behavioral interview startup. Thank you all for being with us this morning. And I know for some of you, it's evening or night. How exciting to have a global panel talking about leading with a head and heart. We also have a global audience joining us. So let's get started with what we say here. I'm going to ask questions to Asif. So, Asif, never grow up. But here. So, a little bit about what's the current unique.
Shobna, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I'm not too sure if we can hear you right now. Akshat, Anthony is the same. Yep.
Has unmuted, so it looks like I have to give me a second. Thank you. Can you hear me now? think we have some technical difficulties there.
A bit.
Okay, let's hope this is better. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me now. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Can you hear me now? Okay. Looks like I'm a bit muffled. Okay, let's try and use the question to you. What's behind the unique theme of your evening?
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to jump in a bit here. I know that maybe the connection was a bit clearer. Shobana would want us to go ahead with the
Sure.
interruptions. So I'm just
Sure.
wondering, I don't know if we prepared opening statements or anything of the sort, or if there are certain things about our work that we would each like to highlight while we wait for Shobana to step in and lead us again. So we've each got about a minute for opening statements. And I'm wondering, maybe I'll just go to Javier, who's the first person on my screen here. Javier, please take it away.
Well, good morning to everyone. Good evening, good night, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to having you and, of course, having this conversation. The idea that I'm going to propose is just a thought that I'm trying to just get around, spread it out, and think about innovation as a route for the economies, as a route for evolving, as a route where we can be better as humanity, better as persons. The reason is that if we start sharing knowledge, sharing what we have, we will start growing as fast and as faster as we've ever been. Let me put it as simple as an example. If we would try to go to the first floor and we would be using a staircase, well, what would happen if I start on the 5th, 6th, or 7th step instead of always going to the first one? So that's very simple, just to enlighten what we're saying or what I'm trying to propose. So regarding that, I'm saying innovation is an attitude. Does it need an ecosystem to grow and to prosper? Of course. Sharing knowledge. We would have diversity. We would have different points of view. We have different religions, of course, family backgrounds, economic and social environments. So those are many of the components that make this ecosystem work. And then we'll have to go further and do some questions. What about skills? What about the environment? Is it an adverse environment like the one we're living right now, the one that makes us grow, think, or is it a positive one where everything fits out perfectly and then you have the correct? So it's quite complicated when you settle two environments totally open it and you see how to work. Now, facing what we're having right now, well, I think when we start to share, one of the points where we see when we share knowledge are the vaccines, where you just open the source and you have people all around the world start to work about a problem like that. And then we go into many small details. Where is it? Where do I want to go? Where do I put my point of view? Where do I need to address what I want to be? So thank you so much. I think that's a good start for me. Saying thanks to my friend Munish Gupta, chairman of POTV, who are just having us here. And of course, he's a champion of the South Corporation to share technology, innovation, of course, and induce the impact of development. I think that's one of the reasons we badly need during COVID to work that thing. So thanks to Abulti Sharma, also founder of IAM, for this cross-cultural dialogue. And thanks to the lovely moderator, Giovanna, who's right now having just a little problem, but she'll be joining us. I can assure you also that Mexico will take a lead role among developing nations, especially Latin America and Caribbean, for a new paradigm of cooperation and collaboration. Just think about the way the whole world to raise from the menace of this devastating pandemic has taken us. So I think innovation and sharing knowledge is the path that we should follow. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Javier. And I see Shobana is back. Over to you, Shobana.
I hope you can hear me better now. Yeah. Apologies, technology. We love it. We hate it, don't we? All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. And over to you, Akshat. For 1 minute opening, please. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Akshat, and the conversations that I'm most interested in is how are the new conversations going to shape our democracies, societies, and also livelihoods. And this involves the very new ways of alternative livelihoods and learning systems that are evolving as a result of the increased involvement of technology in our lives. And this could have been very unimaginable even a year back. But then, now that we've started to let technology into our lives to a degree, how do we use it to also promote wellness to an actual real new degree, not just making up for the lack of physical centers in the world, but also, for instance, curing loneliness in the world, right? Which is a pandemic of its own. So, conversations like that are the ones that I'd like to take forward today, too. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Anthony.
My passion is growth. How do we help children, teachers, leaders in schools grow? And one lens which I do that and look through is a growth mindset, the understanding that each of us can grow our abilities, our talents, given the right strategies, given the right feedback, given the right conditions, as Javier was talking about, the right culture, and how do we make kids happy, healthy, and successful so they can go into the world and not only grow themselves individually, but help us grow as a community, both locally and globally. So I'm very excited to be here and learn from our panelists as well and talk a little bit more about growth mindset.
Thank you so much, Asif.
Hi, everyone. First up, really excited to be here. And my area of passion really uh, is a part of our lives, irrespective of whether you're an entrepreneur, a student, and who will eventually get into the workspace, or a working professional. We end up spending three-fourths of our lives at work, and that's what drives us, and that's what we really end up doing. Uh, how do you make that life a little better? How do you impact uh, people at a real level and help them move beyond targets in business to see if you can lead with empathy? And that's really a passion area. We're also quite passionate about areas like mental health, well-being, and building a culture that truly encompasses every single one, whether it's from the perspective of inclusion or diversity, not just in gender or race, but in thinking. And I really look forward to the panel.
Thank you for that, Asif. And last but not least, Ruth and Temperamental stepping in for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just echoing a lot of the things that I've heard from all of the other speakers this morning. Without doubt, the emphasis on connection, the connectivity that we have. In the wake of the pandemic, we're seeing how much more connected we are as a world. But at the same time, with technology, while there's a shrinking that's happening, there's also an expansion that's happening. Three words that I keep reflecting on time and time again is the need for community. Understanding that in some way or the other, we all are connected. The second word is connection, and then the third word is kinship. And kinship in the sense of, when it comes down to it, we are people, and ensuring that we're taking a human-centered approach to whatever it is we're leading, whether we're leading in the corporate world, leading with technology, whatever it is, but ensuring that we keep the focus on people and centering all of our connections around that. I think that really is a good way for us to start to think around healing from the impact of this pandemic that's taken a toll on us all.
Thank you so much. I think not just me, but I think I'm always getting a feel for how this conversation is going to go. I can already feel a lot of head and heart in this virtual space of us. So I'm going to kick off a part that most people are very interested in, which is the panel discussion. And we're going to do one round of main questions followed by some follow-up questions. And depending on how the flow goes here, we might have time for some closing remarks too. So I want to start off with Asif. Never grow up. What's behind the name, and what's the value proposition you have for companies that you work with?
Well, first up, Shobna, thanks for that question. It's great to be able to share this here, but and we've in fact been in the business for about 11 years now, and we still get asked this question, and our answer remains the same. I think as we grow older as people, we add layers to ourselves based on our experiences and tend to forget, sometimes in the context of work, tend to forget the things that made us awesome. I think the same applies to companies, and that's been our quest really, is to help organizations peel off some of those layers and reach their core, to be childlike, but and specifically when it comes to their greatest asset, which we believe is their people. You asked us about our value proposition. I think besides being a consultancy that has turnkey capabilities, I think at the heart of it, with the kind of uh, people that will tell our clients what works for you, but we'll also tell you what doesn't work for you. And even if it means we've got to be brutally honest and end up losing some business in the process. But I think the reason why I'm even on this panel today is because a huge part of us resonates with what is happening in the world out there today, and at the same time, uh, we believe that some of the things that we're doing and other members in the panel are doing together. I wouldn't. I would say it's all about collaboration, yes, but it's also about coming together and finally coming out with something that truly brings about an impact. That's it from me.
Thank you so much, Asif. I'm sure after this call, you're going to have a lot of people wanting to work with you. I mean, who doesn't want to never grow up, right? So thank you for that. My next question is for Anthony. Anthony, you've been very involved in the States in the education sector, and you've written and talked and trained a lot of people on what is called a growth mindset. Could you share with us what that's really about and why is it critical for individual and organizational success in the education sector, especially?
Great question. Thank you. So growth mindset, the theory, the research started over 30 years ago with Dr. Carol Dweck, a researcher who's now at Stanford University. And she was interested in what would happen if we gave kids different kind of feedback? How could they grow or could they achieve? And she kind of went in with this notion of giving intelligence praise or giving process praise and seeing what the difference was. So quickly, an example. She worked with fifth graders in New York City, one researcher, one student. They were giving a non-verbal intelligent puzzle blocks. They started with very simple patterns and got very complex. And along the way, when these fifth graders got these, which is about 10 and 11-year-olds here in the United States, when they got the puzzle right, the researcher would say either, wow, you got a really good score, you must be really smart at this. Or they would say, wow, you got a really good score, you must have tried really hard. And the incredible research that came from this, ideas that came from it, was that Dr. Dweck went back, and the researchers went back when the kids hit their point of frustration and couldn't finish the puzzle any longer. The puzzles got just too hard. The researcher would say, would you like another challenging puzzle just like this? You'll probably won't get it right, but you'll learn something. And what came back was the kids who got the intelligence praise, wow, you're really smart, less than 50% said, yeah, give me those hard puzzles even though I'll get them right. The kids who got the process effort praise, 4% said, yes, give me the most challenging puzzles, the most challenging work, even if I won't get it right, I want to learn something. And here was born the idea around growth mindset. Growth mindset meaning, yes, I can learn, yes, I can grow, versus a fixed mindset, which means I can't grow, I can't learn. So when I talk to teachers and educators across the country, I'll ask them a question like, do you consider yourself a math student? And math's a loaded language here in the United States for some reason. And many people say they are not. They're fixed-minded. They feel like they never got math right, I'll never get it right, versus if I don't get it right, what can I do? What feedback do I need? What strategies, what coaching, what expertise? So at its very essence, growth mindset is very simply this. It's the understanding all of us can grow our abilities, our talents, and our intelligence. What I counsel and mentor and coach school teachers and school leaders across the country with is, what are the strategies, what are the behaviors of the adults? So here's the important thing as I close. It's not the mindsets of the kids that matter most. It's the mindsets of the adults. Now, in John Hattie's work, many people know his research from Australia, visible learning, the 252 influences that influence student learning. And there's high ones up on the scale. And one of the highest ones is, what is the teacher's assessment of the achievement of their students? What do they believe in them? Do they have the right mindset to teach these children, no matter where they are in their intelligence or abilities?
Thank you for that, Anthony. Such important work. And, like you said, the mindset of the adults is what really we need to be paying attention to. It's so true. As a mother of 2 young kids, I couldn't agree more. It's me who needs to do most of the change. Over to you, Javier. So you have a track record of establishing relationships, partnerships, and working with people around the world to basically advance innovation. And you've talked a lot about knowledge diplomacy. So in the context of post-pandemic recovery and navigating this pandemic, can you talk a little bit about knowledge diplomacy and the importance of it?
Yep, gladly. It's really great to pay attention to what everybody's saying, because that makes me put a question here on the table to try to understand the importance or the relevance of this complete subject. And the first one would be, if are we aware of our present? Those are questions that we need to put in an everyday, daily basis life. Are we aware that we are 8 billion people? Are we conscious what we're just seeing for the past year, the fragility of life? Something as simple that comes out of a living world, a living planet. Our planet is alive, and maybe it's not liking what he's seeing. We have challenges as basic as water and food for most of the world population. But in the meanwhile, we are trying to put out, or better say yet, we have already missions that are landing in Mars, and there is a mission that is going to go in 2030 for humans to go into Mars, and there's another one to Jupiter. So in that conversation, we're putting out that we're going to be an interplanetary species. In the meanwhile, we have to take care of our basic consumption to be alive as a species, which would be just water and a healthy environment. So which ones are our challenges? Where would you want to go? What's going to be our future? Something as basic as it made us different as a species, as a Homo sapiens, which was to talk, to conversate, to be together, our natural way of behaving, gather together, give a kiss, give a hug. Then it turns out that that's the cause that it's making this spread, or might be, I don't know, but that's another conversation. So when you understand that we have different goals, but we have main challenges, well, one of the parts that we need to encompass is the knowledge, the diplomatic way of sharing, but not only on a private way, but governments being part of it. Anthony was just saying, and I agree with him, education. Are we really educating our future generations towards we need to know? Should we put more attention into that? Should we need more lawyers, or should we need more programmers, or should we need people that back again start looking to the sky or look inside of us? Those are the questions that I want to put on the table. See, are we doing the right thing or are we not? How to impact people, as he was saying. Should we gather into one goal? Do we have as a species the same goal or not? Or as different societies? So when we start sharing those goals, when you start sharing those problems, when you start sharing those challenges, when you realize the expectation of life is growing, and connectivity as well is a way for us to be better, and using that as a tool to be better as a species, then you have another mindset, as you were saying, to go forward, and that is being positive, propositive, and always trying to put something on the table for everyone to be better. So once you start realizing that you share knowledge, that you share your experiences, that's going to help. And not only on the personal level, because that's an everyday basis on social media, but then you have it on an educational way, and that's through the academia. And that's when teachers go back and forward, or students want to go and study to another university, not only because it's a very ranked good university, but it's the experience of meeting people, the experience of getting to know different food, different environments. And then you have it on another way, which is on the private sector. So when you put it out and you say, okay, now we have all this, but we need the governments. We need the governments to be part of this. We need them to engage. We need them to make the rules. We need them to make the investments. Then you realize that you have this huge ecosystem that is trying to get better and better. And that's main part of what you were just asking me about the knowledge diplomacy. That's a basic part. And as much as you start working on it and you start building the spaces where you can talk and share, many good things and ideas come along.
Thank you, Javier. I think you touched on a number of important points, but one of the big questions out there is that what and how are we actually educating future generations, and also how do we come to some kind of common understanding as to what should the goals or of humanity be as we try to move forward in what's become a very complex world, right? Which takes me to Ruth. Ruth, you came to Canada as an international student, and soon after you graduated, you started the Inclusion Project. Tell us a little bit about it, but also in many of your conversations and interviews, you have talked about a challenge we have, tokenism being a very big part of inclusion. Shed some light on it. Thank you.
Absolutely. But I like to, whenever I respond to question or I get the opportunity to be part of spaces such as this, where we're coming together as leaders or learners in our respective areas, it really takes me back to reflect on my own personal journey and everything that has led me here. And thank you for referencing the fact that I migrated here to Canada, to these unceded lands. As an immigrant a few years ago. So I moved from Nigeria, and what prompted me to make that decision really was, my society at the time was quite homogeneous in terms of in spite of the diversity that we had, I thought there was still quite a bit of space between all that I thought that I knew of my nation or of myself as a person, and how much more there was to learn with being in a different context. That said, I made the decision to move to the other part of the world to try to understand myself a bit more as someone who is able to connect to community, to contribute in some ways. And it's been a most splendid journey, I have to say, over the past 5 years or so that I have been over here. What we do at the Inclusion Project, we like to say that we work from a place of lived experience as racialized people, as people who are minorities in other regards as well, to support organizations around issues of equity and inclusion. What that means on a day-to-day basis is, for instance, in the course of me coming here to study, I came to take a program over at Royal Roads University that was really quite global in terms of the makeup. So we had students from India, from China, from Senegal, from all over the world. And it was really interesting, the unique perspectives and lived experiences that each of us brought. But one thing that was quite common across the board was the need that we felt to contribute, to belong, to find a sense of belonging, to find our identity, very much like me trying to understand myself in a whole other context. And what we began to see quite quickly was how limiting some of the opportunities were. Now, I'm talking about people who have left kith and kin to come across, or to travel over several mountains and oceans and all of that to try to make a home here and find a way to contribute. But to not be able to access equitable employment opportunities, which is one of the things that we found quite fundamentally, apart from, things like basic things like food and shelter and security and access to healthcare. Employment we find to be quite central as kind of a fulcrum for mitigating some of the challenges that people face because they're not able to access some of these other services. And so for a lot of my mates, for myself and a lot of my mates, it became that quest towards, we're looking for opportunities for self-actualization. we're here, we want to make a difference, we want to feel like we belong, we want to feel included. And it didn't take too long to realize some of the gaps that exist. So in a country such as Canada, that's really attracting talent from all over the world. In developing countries such as Nigeria, where I come from, or other parts of Africa or South America, really other parts of the world, there's this concept of brain drain that nations, that society tend to talk about these days, because you find a migration of talent from those kinds of countries to nations such as Canada, as the UK, as the United States, and others. But then comes the question of how much difference are you able to make? How much contribution really are you able to make in this new context? So the work that we do at the Inclusion Project is in part nation building. That's kind of how we've started to make sense of it. It's our way of supporting policymakers. It's our way of supporting corporate leaders. It's our way of supporting civil society more broadly, academicians and others, to bridge that divide between some of the tokenistic, some of the more damaging, harmful practices that we see in policy, in process, and in practice. And I have to say to you, while there's a place for intentions and intentionality in all of this, the need to make tangible commitment, the need to stand in that space and do what it takes, whatever it takes, to ensure that none of us, whether it's indigenous people whose lands we all get the opportunity and share privilege of building relationships on, or really doing some of these things around work, as I was alluding to, whether it's with indigenous people and how historically they've been marginalized and excluded, or newcomers such as myself who are trying to find a place here, to know that there is a place for each and every one of us. That really is what the future is about. And when it comes down to it, again, going back to where I started about, we are all humans, and there is just that need for us to as humans, come together as equals, come together to access opportunities that are equitable to our respective needs, and the skills and expertise that we all bring to the table.
Thank you for that, Ruth. Really appreciate it. I would like to pose the last main question to Akshat. Akshat, I hear you started your first startup at the age of 14, where most kids probably were just running around in their bicycles. You started your first startup. So what are your takeaways up until this point? And tell us a little bit about, was it your head or your heart that basically guided you during your entrepreneurial launch?
Hey, thank you so much for the question. I really love the focus of the panel on thinking about what should the future education system look like, right? A lot of these questions around, are we educating our kids in a way that really supports them in the future when we're not even sure what the future is going to look like? And how do we even start to make policies that impact a large set of kids? As Avia was pointing out, we are also going to Mars, and we also have the basic problem of taking care of a lot of people who are still below the poverty line. So how do you tackle both of those problems and think about what really matters when you're trying to educate kids for the future? I've had the privilege of experiencing alternative learning systems to an extent. So I kind of received a proto UBI when I was about 16, and that gave me a chance to not just like not go to school, but also explore systems and learn for myself and design a self-learning journey. And I think that is what the shape of future education systems might look like. People being more autonomous, since it's so hard to predict what's actually going to matter, right? And how do we then create support structures for not just people like myself who might have access to stuff like UBI, or who might even have, privileged set of adults who'd lend their resources to me, but also for like different range of people, right? So those are, I think, like really important questions. And what really also matters is that we are taking kids and learners as stakeholders in that process. And I'm really glad that I have a chance to participate in this panel, being the youngest to kind of participate in those discussions. Thank you.
Everything you said resonates with me and warms my heart. I have two young sons who are entrepreneurs and who have had access to all different models of education. So, the importance of what you have said, I just can't emphasize. Thank you for that. So, we're going to move into a second round of questions where we're going to just get a little bit of a deeper know of our panelists and some of their journeys. And Asif, uh, you wrote several articles on LinkedIn, and in one of them, you said you don't hire based on pedigree. You have a simple 5-point checklist. Tell us more.
Thanks, Anthony. But let me see if I can get this right. Uh, well, I think when we were kickstarting a company, and I've worked in a, this comes from some of my learnings of having worked in marketing or in banking previous to kickstarting Never Grow Up. Uh, we always wanted to see what we didn't want to become, and I think through that exploration, when we finally culled out the kind of people we want to work with as a team, we narrowed it down, like you rightly said, to five key things. And give me a second to probably define each, because it might mean different things for different people. But I think one of the first things we look for when we are working with a fellow team member is humility, is being humble. And humble doesn't necessarily mean being quiet or taking one for the team, but it also means about taking responsibility and giving credit to others for some of the things that you come up with. You listen to an idea, you get inspired by something, and I think one of the most basic things we don't do is give credit to someone. And that's one aspect when I say being humble. Second, I think we look at people who are effective. Doesn't matter what stream you've come from. So we've had a graphic designer who's actually a chartered accountant, and essentially what we're looking for in people is people who can make a dent, who can get stuff done. The third thing I think is the most important thing for us is adaptability. I sort of heard a TED talk, and we quite resonate with that. Is that the world today has a complex set of problems, and you need a bunch of polymaths to be able to think agile and bring multiple perspectives together. And I think that's what we look for. We look for adaptability. We look for lifelong learners and agile thinkers. We look for people who are remarkable, and when we say that, I think we're really trying to say that irrespective of what role you're in, you understand the bigger picture, you understand the business you're in, the fact that you're creative and resourceful, and last but not the least, I think people who are transparent, which is with us and with others in the ecosystem, whether it's a client or a fellow team member. I think that's what it narrows down to. Those five things, uh, like humble, effective, adaptable, remarkable, and transparent. Now, if I have a second, I would let me tell you how we look at it as well. Ever since we started the company, we've never really had a login logout time, or we've never tracked attendance. If you've I mean, considering from looking at it from the Indian market and knowing what I know, there are a lot of people who spend their lives just tracking attendance and seeing what time you logged in and logged out. I think in the history of our company, we haven't done that, and we don't intend to. I think if you hire someone, you need to trust them. You need to trust them enough to do their jobs. I think that intrinsic trust, when an organization puts into their people tend to reciprocate, right? And that's the attitude, and that's how we operate. Yeah. Barring that, and because we never grow up, our account stamp has a Darth Vader on it. It says approved for payment, and that's how we roll.
Awesome. I really hope this is something that a lot of people will try and replicate in their own organizations. But I think you touched on something that is very critical: trust. Whether it's personal relationships or professional relationship, without it, success is very hard to follow. So I'd like to ask the next question to Javier. Javier, cross-cultural collaboration is something that you're engaged in. But for those of us who have worked in that space, cross-cultural collaboration is actually challenging because of all the different perspectives, divisiveness, and points of view, ideologies that people have both in the professional and personal space. So when you work with different entities, How do you support and promote cross-cultural collaboration? And what do you have to say to business leaders, government leaders, and others about advancing cross-cultural collaboration?
That is a very interesting question. And I would put it out this way. That is the way that businesses and education and things are happening in our world right now. I think if we just try to spread it out or separate it, better said, once into actual networking, social working, research, investigation, whatever. It's quite hard to think that if you do it by yourself, you're gonna succeed. Of course, you can, but it's easier when you do it together. When you were saying, and it's very interesting because there's always a factor which we were just talking about, and it's trust. Here on the opposite, you usually find a little bit of fear and risk because you're talking about trust. And when you go out and you knock in somebody else's door and come with an idea or with a proposal, doesn't matter the experience you have, doesn't matter the background you have, you go into those phases. So you need to learn how to trust in each other. You need to set out those goals, to lay down all those barriers, and see as soon as you do that and you learn to communicate and to understand, because it doesn't matter if we speak the same language, but you need to, you and I, and I'm talking you as the outside, have a same goal, have a common sense, having our mindset also that we are aiming for a better world, for a better society, for a better health education system, for a better everything, and not only for the present but to the future. That's when you start engaging, and that's when ideas start flowing, and then from ideas you start working into projects, and then when you go into projects, you ask other people who are in finances, and then you go and put people that are in research, and then this ecosystem starts working, and then you realize that as soon as you have people, as I've been saying, entities, universities, institutions from other countries, from all other points of view, things are happening and start happening very, very fast. So that is part of the rush, the emotion of being part of this. It's when you go out and seek for people, seek for talent. That's, by the way, there's talent everywhere. When you base it on the skills, when you base it on what they want to do, not only what they're working, but on their capabilities, on their way of dreaming, of looking up towards the sky and looking up towards the future. I think that's when you start engaging to people that are almost very positive about never, doesn't matter what their present is, they're always looking a brighter future.
Thank you for that, Javier. I appreciate that. I'm going to ask Anthony a question around emotional intelligence and empathy. You've worked with education professionals. I'm sure you've talked to a number of people in the sector and also young and older students. Does the education sector value empathy and emotional intelligence? And how does the system actually help the young develop empathy and emotional intelligence, which all of us, I'm sure, will agree is so critical to wellness and for us to have successful futures?
Well, if we don't, we better, right? If it's we know better, we have to do better. Certainly, you think about people in the workplace, you think about kids at school. How do you like school? How do you like work? If people say, I don't like it, people don't like me, I don't feel like I belong there, well, there's not going to be much work being done. There's not going to be a lot of learning being done. So when you think about the frame that I put, the lens, growth mindset, that everyone can learn. So some great words have been tossed out in this panel. Words like inclusion, innovation, self-actualization. I'm all about self-actualization. Let's help kids become whatever they want to become. And when you think about all that, you have to think about how can we do this in a culture of growth in a classroom, in a schoolhouse, in a whole district, in the community, in the world. And we better stop believing that all kids can do it and then acting in a way that shows them that they can do it. And one way, think about this real quick, because I ask my audiences of educators this question all the time. Think about one teacher that impacted you. Go ahead right now, people listening, people on the panel, think of one teacher that really impacted you in a way that was very, very important. Now, by this time, most people have a name, they have a face, and they have a feeling. And when I asked people, what did they do? What did that teacher do for you? It was how they taught. It was the passion which they taught. It was the relationship that they created, that they believed in you, that they saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. And when we make that connection, when we empathize with our students, when we understand that they all can grow, instead of blaming students, we become curious about students. And we ask questions like, how can we help her learn? What am I not doing well as an educator or as a leader right now to help more kids learn? Instead of blaming students, which happens, we think about how to help, assist, support students so they can reach that self-actualization. We think about growth mindset. It's all about the language, the strategies, the relationships that we're building with kids. So we want to be that impactful teacher that we felt. We want to do the same for our students, whether they're at home, you're as a parent, or in school. Because many times my audience, people in the audience will say, not only did I learn how to teach my class better, I think I learned how to be a better parent today. And so it's that idea that we have to empathize, we have to be compassionate. And it's so interesting as I close on this question that the title is series is the same title as my book, right? Leading with Head and Heart. And in this, I talk about empathy, I talk about dignity, I talk about love, I talk about equity, I talk about culture. It's not a deep dive into pedagogy, but it's certainly a deep dive into how do we create atmospheres and environments so more kids learn and achieve, so we can meet those innovative needs that we need as a community, as a world, whether that is how we travel, where we live, and the environment that we create, the safe environment that we create for all of us.
Thank you so much. It's just wonderful to hear, leading professionals like yourself use words like love, empathy, respect, dignity, all those things that make us a unique species, and all of those things that, we really need to have in our lives in order to be successful. Which takes me to Akshat. Akshat, HR technology, has been disrupted like so many other sectors. So, in the context of wellness, recovery, both during and after the pandemic, what kind of a role can HR technology play in terms of making our society more humane and more kind and, add purpose to our work and personal lives?
Thank you for the question. I think I'd like to take it from what Asif was talking about hiring people without pedigree and looking at, for instance, their GPAs or where they came from or how many years of experience that they have, and focusing on human values and what truly matters to the work, and using that for HR technology. And when we started to think about this problem of, why are more companies not able to do that, right? And the simple fact is that those companies receive far more applications than they would ever be able to humanly look at or consider as, unique individuals with unique set of qualities. And they can't do that. Hence, they start using proxies to judge human beings, which also adds a lot of stress to the whole ecosystem. And that starts to define not just our employment cycles, but also our learning cycles. So for instance, if companies start to look at where you came from, like the college you graduated from, it becomes even more important for you to get into that college and even not pay attention to the kind of skills you can acquire, right? So how do you remove those proxies from the equation and still make sure that companies are able to hire the best people or the people who are most compatible with them? And I think that's really a fantastic area for technology to come in. How do you make human processes scalable? So instead of using black box algorithms and throwing at even recruiters a set of new standardized tests and newer employment screening tests and stuff like that, I don't think that takes stress out of the equation. It adds just more stress to people who've come out of an already stressful learning system, right? And at the same time, how do you maintain trust in the system, right? How do you make sure that people feel they were not hired for the wrong reasons, right? And that's a problem that I'm very excited about and I'm working on. So yeah, that's the startup about. It's called Work Hack, and we're trying to make behavioral interviews using AI more scalable? Thanks.
Thank you so much. As someone who loves behavioral interviews and who has, conducted them, I just love everything you said, and that is the future of organizations. And looking forward to learning more about you and your work in future days, Akshat. The last question. We're getting close to finishing off this wonderful event here, and I'm going to ask Ruth. Ruth, if you were making a 1-minute elevator speech on the importance of leading with the head and heart and inclusion as being part of organizations in the 21st century, what would that be?
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot for that, Shavana. I think in the 21st century, there is both a moral and ethical imperative for inclusion. And I could just stop there. Because if we took a minute to reflect on everything that the pandemic has showed us in recent times, it's knowing that the people who have been historically left behind, if we don't do something and do something really soon, they would be further marginalized. And so the onus, the need, the responsibility for driving change is just as urgent now as the need for us to respond to some of the inequities that have existed in systems. And the one other thing I'll add on to that is, if we're talking systems, we're talking institutions and policies and things like that, what's behind them? Humans. And if we can just connect as humans and see the other, whoever that other is, as humans as well, then we really start to make effort towards true inclusion.
Thank you so much for that. We have touched on so many important concepts, ideas, and I think not just me, but our global audience here has had a feel for how there is another way, and I'm going to say a much better way to lead organizations, and that is definitely with the head and heart. And I just would like to welcome all of you to use this space to make some concluding remarks in terms of leading with the head and heart, how that is a strong, better, kinder, braver approach, irrespective of whether you work in nonprofits, private, or public sectors. What are your final thoughts? May I ask Asif to get us started here? Please unmute Asif. Thank you so much.
Well, I said, give me a second to. Thanks, Shobna, for the question, and I'll take a second to compose my thoughts here. But I've always maintained this, and considering I kickstarted my career in a job in a corporate role after doing a master's program, and having seen through what I have and experiencing what I have, I'll go with one little thought here, and if I may, is our definition of success is needs to be looked at. When I say that, I mean that it's different things for different people, and we need to stop probably looking at success as a corner office and start looking at success from a parameter of how are you contributing, how are you adding value, and what's the kind of legacy you're leaving behind, whether it's from a perspective of culture, whether it's from a perspective of inclusion, or whether it's from a perspective of us as a species and what are you doing for the environment. And I think the minute we start looking at our definition of success and how it alters for different people, I think we all need to walk our path, and I hope that somewhere those paths converge.
Lots to think about there, and very, very important questions. Anthony.
Well, when I think about it in school, in the education sector, we think so much about meeting the standard, having kids passing tests or having test scores high, or getting into, in the States, 4-year Ivy League schools. And just as Asif said, what is our real definition of success? And to really tap into that with our students, our children, our educators, we have to think both. I think what happens is we think either separately with our head or separately with our heart. Like we see someone hurt and we act with our heart. We want to help them and help them feel better. Or we think about how we logically have to get plans together to make sure that all kids are learning so they pass a test. Where I think we don't consider how both the emotion and the logic and the cognition of how we make decisions impacts so many kids, impact our communities, impact society. And if we can take a step back, especially coming off a pandemic, one that is actually still continuing, and can take a deep breath and think about how we can do both, act with both our head to figure out what's important, both our heart to make sure those who are coming with us or how we're leading them is doing so in a way that shows compassion, that shows understanding, empathy, and inclusion. And I think we'll be on a pathway for more success.
Thank you, Anthony. Ruth, your thoughts?
I think going back to it is people, people, people. The need for us to ensure that whatever approach we're taking as we're recovering is one that doesn't see people just as means to an end, but sees us as a holistic representation of the intersecting experiences, values, and perspectives that we bring to the table. And when we start to do that and come together to a level playing field, whether as corporations, as policymakers, as educators, or anybody else in civil society, and on like that, as long as we can see ourselves first as equals, as long as we can see ourselves first as people who are going after the same thing around self-actualization and whatever other things we desire, we will get there.
We will get there. Akshat, what do you think?
Hi, it's been super interesting to hear everyone talk about today. I think my concluding thought is that when we start to think about wellness or even empathy for a large set of people, it needs us to also design systems that promote it. So, conversations about making the workplace healthier and safer and everything around it needs to be accompanied by real efforts and hard work to craft incentives that really align with people not having to, for instance, drive sleepless shifts or do things that are hazardous to themselves too. And how do you create that culture too? Yeah. And at the same time, I'd also like to pass Supriya's remark, who's been a great inspiration to me and her work too, to everyone around the world. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been an incredibly diverse and meaningful panel and a conversation. I've got a lot of takeaways from this conversation, and I'm sure that's the case with our global audience too. We're coming to the end of the show, and I want to take a moment to thank all of you, dear panelists. Thank you very much for being here today and for sharing your time, your insights, and your journeys with us. Our global audience for making the time to join us, our partners, PIO's tech lead, Anil Yadav, who has been helping us immensely. And last but not the least, a big shout out to Anubhuti Sharma, founder of Impresario Global. All of this is possible, and we've been here today because of our collective efforts. And in lieu of registration for this event, many of you have kindly considered donating generously to CPAA India, who will be helping children who are suffering from cancer and who are in dire need of accessing essential food items. And there's more information about all of this on Impresario Global's website. So let's now conclude today's show by watching a brief video with a very important message from actor Vivek Anand Oberoi. Thanks, everyone.
We already know that people with comorbidities are at a high risk of getting COVID-19. Their immunity is seriously compromised. Imagine the condition of underprivileged children fighting cancer. The poor parents have sold everything they own and yet can't afford the treatment. Forget treatment. They can't even afford to provide basic daily nutrition to their child. Imagine living in that hunger and constant fear of death. I had this heartfelt need to do something to help these children somehow. So Cancer Patients Aid Association and I have pledged to save 3,000 such high-risk underprivileged children who are fighting cancer. I request you all to join us in pledging your support to Cancer Patients Aid Association through the Emerging from COVID-19 campaign, a cross-cultural dialogue series led by thought leaders from across the world, coming together to talk about holistic wellness, and recovery in a world shaken by the pandemic. You can join us from anywhere in the world on your device. In lieu of the registration, I urge you to just consider for a moment that just 1,000 rupees or $15 can get comprehensive nutrition for an underprivileged child fighting cancer for an entire month. That's right. Only $15 a month can build their immunity to survive this dark and scary time. Now let us all unite to emerge from this together. Let us show love and compassion. Let us be empathetic. Let us collaborate for a better world.
We bring you daily glimpses of the changing India and India's engagement with its nearly 40 million affluent and influential diaspora.